We begin the next phase of our lives, Nan and I will still be with you in spirit. I have often said that you can take the man out of the UN, but you can't take the UN out of the man.
Kofi Annan by Frederick Eckert. A 307-page document is one of the most authoritative books and a comprehensive publication on the life and legacy of the former Secretary General of the United Nations, written by one of his key spokespersons. Kofi Atta Annan has been described as one of the towering figures of the past and current centuries, who has just passed away. He spent at least 45 years of his 80 years on earth working with the United Nations system. So what can we remember of Kofi Atta Annan as Secretary General of the United Nations and as an international civil servant? The sunrise and the sunset. We are in 1938, a year before the start of the Second World War in Kumasi, a community in the British West African colony of Gold Coast, and the heavens said, "Let there be this man," and so it was.
He was born in Ghana in 1938. He is the son of Anthony and Victoria Annan.
A twin, Kofi Atta Annan was the son of an educated Agan family with huge footprints in the colonial and post-colonial administrations of the Gold Coast and Ghana.
His father was a senior staff of Unilever. He was export manager. So Kofi Annan was born in Ghana before independence, because as you know, Ghana was the first African country from British colonization to gain independence in 1957.
The son of a well-to-do family, growing up innocently with the violence of the Second World War, which killed millions of people, Kofi Atta Annan was educated and graduated from one of the most emblematic missionary elite schools in West Africa, the Cape Coast Methodist Boarding School of Mfat Sipim.
Kofi Annan at that time was a student in Kumasi College of Science and Technology.
Young Kofi Atta Annan's early journey was full of coincidence. For example, the year he graduated from school, aged 19, is the same year his nation will become the first colony to become independent in Black Africa.
Democracy is the most successful governing ideology the world has ever seen.
For those of us who knew Mr. Kofi Annan, at least at a personal level, it's sad indeed that we've lost such a man of quality.
Affordable to do, the parents of the future world's diplomat-in-chief flew him overseas to further studies to secure a better place in society.
He then went to United States, where he read economics at Macalester College in Minnesota, and then very later went to Geneva at the Geneva International Graduate School. And while doing that, he started working for United Nations.
A well-educated individual with a back-to-back African and European classroom experience, Kofi Atta Annan's first workload with the United Nations family was in the budget and finance worlds, with postings in countries like Ethiopia, where he worked with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa.
He started as a senior staff in finance and administration for the World Health Organization in Geneva, and then enters the United Nations in New York, where he successfully held the positions of Human Resource Director, Financial Director and Controller, and then at the DPKO, Department of Peacekeeping Operation, he succeeded and has been appointed by Boutros Ghali, Deputy Secretary General in charge of peacekeeping operations.
He was the first black African to run this indispensable instrument of international relations called the United Nations, and he ran it for 2 terms with a lot of efficiency, with great success, with great admiration, and in fact he left a United Nations much better than he met it.
I've had an opportunity to be very close to him. That was in 2016, and that was in the VIP room where Her Majesty the Queen receives people. So we were in the same room, and while Her Majesty the Queen was moving around the room, we were in the same space. I think it was a huge experience for me because he's a role model to the kind of work that I do, which is about peace building. We learn a lot from him, especially from his humble background. A family man who married twice, survived amongst others by 3 children he had with his last wife. From Sweden, Kofi Atta was the first United Nations Secretary General from the United Nations system.
When you are called upon to lead in world affairs, you have to show a lot of human value, you have to show a lot of human virtue, you have to show a lot of professional competence and efficiency, and you have to show a lot of humanism. All of these Mr. Kofi Annan showed, and therefore the history of international relations will never be complete without mention being made of Mr. Kofi Atta Annan.
Sometimes we have shared the exhilaration of success, such as winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. At others, we have faced bitter trials, especially the tragic loss of 22 of our friends and colleagues in Baghdad in 2003.
Kofi Annan in his leadership had a very humanist heart, especially for the fact that he grew up within the UN system, which is not usually the case to become a Secretary General. So for our peace building work, it's about the process to get to there, and Kofi Annan has been so keen on trying to see how he addresses issues of the continent, which is Africa, which is also very important.
In the early years of 2000, he was the one who talked about this summit of this Millennium Declaration, which was derived from one of his books. He also launched the idea of responsibility to protect. He also launched the Commission on Peace Building.
This book chronicles some of the key events of our time that saw Kofi Atta Annan involved at the highest level of decision making. The 9/11 attacks in the United States of America that almost brought the world to a standstill. The arrival of Facebook in 2004 as one of the most revolutionary issues of digital technology. The wars in Bosnia, Somalia, and of course, the collapse of the Soviet Union. The war in Syria, the invasion of Iraq, and there's so much dreamt and talked about reforms of the United Nations, where Kofi Atta Annan reduced bureaucracy at the organization's headquarters in New York from 6,000 to 5,000 personnel.
When he left UN Secretary General office and was called after the 2008 elections in Kenya, you know Kenya was at the eve of a genocide, and Kofi Annan took this mission very seriously. And when the African Union called him as a son of Africa to come and put his talent at the service of peace in Kenya. He did that work for 6 months, and everybody recognized that if he hasn't put all his negotiation skills at the service of peace in Kenya, perhaps there might have been a genocide in Kenya.
He also believed a lot in seeing how countries could drop down their arms and countries could forget about even using arms to solve their problems. It was a case of the Green Tree Accord that we saw, and we have been very hoping and aspiring that we'll be able to have Kofi Annan, in the case of our own crisis that we have, to come and preach more peace, to see how we could be able to live and do things in the way in which is right.
A polyglot with a knack on some African languages, Kofi Annan was fluent also in his native tongue, Akan, alongside English and French.
He also has strong analytic capacities, which is also a skill that is requested from every diplomat who wants to be successful. Kofi Annan offered to the world his analysis, his vision, his thoughts on where we should go with multilateralism.
2 days ago, I was watching a short clip of him on CRTV, and we're talking about his work, and I think on Equinox, and he spoke a lot about sustainability, which is very important. And in this, I cannot cite it directly, but he was trying to talk about the fact that if we don't work very hard to build our world that people can enjoy tomorrow, then we are creating space for more conflict and for more violence, because there'll be more greed, there'll be more egoism, and the world will not be what it has to be.
Kofi Atta Annan has been known as the most traveled Secretary General of the United Nations to Cameroon. That reminds me of one key expression in international relations, especially when it comes to relationship between the United States of America and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. A special relationship, an expression coined by the first British Prime Minister to serve Queen Elizabeth II, Winston Churchill, when he said, between the US and the UK, it is a special relationship. Kofi Atta Annan can be qualified as a very special friend of Cameroon. He had been here on several occasions. But what explains the speciality of the relationship between the United Nations of Kofi Atta Annan and Cameroon?
You can remember the circumstances. At that time, the whole African continent was, pushing for a re-election of Boutros Ghali. They were really sort of solidarity, pushing that Boutros Ghali should be elected for a second term. But as you all remember, the USA was completely against that re-election. So what President Biya did was to write to his colleagues, the African president, asking them to support, instead of insisting that Boutros Ghali will be re-elected, they should ensure a second term for the African continent. And then he wrote to his colleagues asking them rather to support Kofi Atta Annan. And I guess that Kofi Atta Annan himself didn't forget it.
Mr. Kofi Atta Annan opted to not only bring his mind and body to bear on that conflict between Cameroon and Nigeria, but he even brought on his good offices, the good offices of the UN, to the extent that it was like a personal crusade for him. It was like an assignment of the United Nations to get that conflict solved.
One quality about Kofi Atta Annan is accepting when something is wrong. In his leadership in the UN, there are so many times where, after realizing that the UN could not deliver as it had to, for example, the case of Rwanda, we saw the UN coming back to say, oh, we could do better. I think that's one thing which is very important for a young person like me. In the spirit of his winning the Nobel Peace Prize, the transition towards that was a lot of humility. In winning this prize, he stays very connected with his family. I followed up a news report, connecting with his sister, and the sister spoke of how they were communicating very often. I think it's very important to us young people that no matter how far we go, no matter who we become, we need to connect with the family, with the people that have been able to train us, to make us stronger in what we do. I think these are core values which we have been able to see, in Kofi Annan.
On January 1, 1997, these Ghanaian diplomats walked into this building, the United Nations head office in New York, in the most high capacity to become the world's diplomat-in-chief.
I, Kofi Annan, functions entrusted to me
as Secretary General of the United Nations.
as Secretary General of the United Nations, eternal to the organization.
Congratulations, sir.
Let me just quote Kofi Annan when he said that literacy can bring you from misery to hope. I think this is something that really touches me as a think tank leader, because Kofi Annan is one of those leaders who recognize the place of education to change people's life.
He is a team builder, and working as a team is very important in the success of every leader, and that's what we see. I think he worked so well with young people, old people who are experienced, with mentors who were able to put him on the right path.
I remember once I met him in the Geneva streets. He was walking, and I was with George Ebune. We were covering the summit ahead of us, and I went to him. I greet him and I present myself. I'm from Cameroon. Oh, your country is a very beautiful country, and I'm really touched by the special endeavors you people are putting in the maintaining peace, especially in Bakassi and beyond. So he played a special role. We should put emphasis on that particular point. He was a great African. He was very smart and very polished.
Of the many global good things Kofi Annan did was the peaceful resolution of the border difference between Cameroon and Nigeria over the suspected oil-rich Bakassi Peninsula.
The Bakassi conflict was solved with the personal involvement of Mr. Kofi Annan, and the wisdom and the tact and the intelligence and the political will of President Biya and President Obasanjo. And today, after following the Green Tree Accord in New York City, where I happen to have been a privileged witness,
I remember one of the summits in Geneva. I guess it was the second summit, and there was a sort of role. Nobody could really understand what was happening. Can you imagine President Obasanjo was expecting to come and meet President Biya, and the meeting was scheduled at 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. And at 11:30, it was announced that President Obasanjo has not even taken off from Abuja. So there was a sort of tension, a sort of impatience among the delegation. And what Kofi Annan did was, I found it very smart from him, very polished. He came, he improvised a sort of rendezvous with President Biya. He came to discuss with him for 1 hour, to calm down the tension. Because the situation was getting, some of us, we were getting nervous in the delegation. Some was even saying that President Biya should not accept to meet President Obasanjo again. But as you know, President Biya, very calm, very polished person. What was exactly Kofi Annan doing at that time. So they were able, the two were able, to calm down the situation until President Obasanjo's arrival, and the summit was postponed to the next day, and things went rather well.
We have to be thankful to the personal involvement of Mr. Kofi Atta Annan, because it has worked and it is a school. It has worked and it is a school, and most students of international relations will always talk about the way the Bakassi conflict was resolved as a method of conflict resolution.
Kofi Atta Annan was also decorated with Doctor Honoris Causa at the University of Yaoundé.
He was particularly devoted in the resolution of the Bakassi crisis. And I know, for the best of my knowledge, he was acting not only in that capacity, but I guess it was also driven with the spirit of gratitude, knowing the particular role President Biya played in his election.
When he got to Cameroon on one of his occasions, he had to go to Paris to meet with President Chirac of France. And President Biya offered the presidential jet to take him to Paris, and President Biya instructed me as Minister for Special Duties at the Presidency of the Republic to accompany him on the presidential jet to Paris. I mean, what a privilege for as humble a person and as modest a person as I was. Of course, I accompanied him on the presidential jet, and on that trip, at lunchtime, he was with his wife, by the way, because he came to Cameroon on that visit with his wife. While they were having lunch, I didn't feel I merited sitting on the same lunch table with him, because after he was Secretary General of the United Nations, that is only reserved for people of that stature and status. But he invited me to lunch with him. Of course, an invitation I humbly accepted, and I lunched with him and his wife on the same table.
He's keen on social media. His social media page on Facebook is very, very active. So it means that he was ready to ensure that we have things like Facebook, we have things like Twitter. And in the light of the SDGs, I think he was part of the MDGs. He actually saw how the challenges were there.
The Nobel Peace Prize laureate injected his blood and soul to see Cameroon and Nigeria end their clash in the most diplomatic manner, and so it was, with the know-how of African brotherhood.
His first wife was Nigerian. With him he has 2 kids. So you could have said, being an in-law to Nigeria, maybe he was not going to be objective, but believe you me, his presence was a reassuring and assuring presence of objectivity, of fair play. And that made President Biya and President Obasanjo feel quite comfortable with one another.
Today we have a peaceful border thanks to him and various issues in the world that he has been able to solve. I think it's very peculiar because of these qualities that he has.
He loved Cameroon through President Biya, and he saw President Biya as the embodiment of a Cameroon of openness. He saw President Biya as the embodiment of the Cameroon of the future. He saw President Biya as the embodiment of a liberal person.
The elders, the group of eminent personalities created by former South African President Nelson Mandela, will be one of the institutions which will continue to build the legacy of Kofi Atta Annan's service to mankind. Kofi Atta Annan has been remembered as one of the global personalities so concerned with the unity of Cameroon. Back in 2000, a delegation of some Cameroonians met Kofi Atta Annan to ensure Cameroon is divided. In one of the most heated debates, Kofi Atta Annan indicated to them the nature of the indivisibility of Cameroon. Out of that, one Cameroonian newspaper had the courage to write that Kofi Atta Annan is a bright individual, simply because he did not adhere to their ideology of splitting Cameroon into portions. Going back to his office in the United Nations, Kofi Atta Annan bought a copy of that publication. as one of his souvenirs from Cameroon. The why was Kofi Atta so attached to the principle of the indivisibility of Cameroon?
The last visit he paid to Cameroon, he insisted on that indivisibility of our country. And as if he was advising all Cameroonians, he was saying Cameroonians should put everything to remain united and in peace.
In all freedom, Mr. Kofi Annan believed that Cameroon's unity, the nation of Cameroon, that a territory that was once the people of the United Nations. Cameroon is one of the most successful and the best examples that the United Nations can show for as a victory and success of the United Nations. And therefore, tearing down the unity of Cameroon, tearing down the nation of Cameroon will be tantamount and is tantamount to tearing down the United Nations.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy.